Good afternoon, everybody. It is Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, digital sports producer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, here with Paul Zeise for our weekly Zeise is Right chat with the Post-Gazette sports columnist. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
I am hanging in there. The weather's warming up. It finally feels like spring's really here, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, it is nice out. Unfortunately, I really wrenched my back pretty good, so I can't even take advantage of golf right now because I don't feel good, and I got to get to the chiropractor and figure it out.
Well, we'll get you fixed up, Paul. But before we do that, I want to get into some Steelers topics, some Pirates topics. We'll start with the Steelers. Steelers Twitter was aflutter this week after CBS Sports put out a ranking of all NFL quarterbacks, I think starting quarterbacks for each team. And they ranked Kenny Pickett 28th out of, the 32 teams in the NFL. Lots of Steelers fans were fired up about that, Paul. What do you think of ranking him there? I thought the interesting thing was he was behind three rookie quarterbacks. I think that's probably the baseline you should be comparing him to. A, what do you think of that 28th place overall ranking? And B, ranking him behind three rookies?
I would say ranking him behind three rookies is silly. When I did my own personal rankings, Adam, I had him about 16th or 17th. I mean, I think that's probably a reasonable place. And the caveat was he could probably move to 17th or 18th, depending on Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson and whether or not those two return to form of some sort. We don't know that. But if they do, okay, Russell Wilson is better than Kenny Pickett if Russell Wilson goes back to what he was 2 or 3 years ago. He wasn't last year, though, obviously. Deshaun Watson, I don't know. I think we throw out last year because it was such a abbreviated year for him and whatnot. But at the end of the day, it really feels to me like that's probably about where they should be. And so as we sit here and talk, I'm trying to figure out if I can get some more light in the subject. There we go. Now you can actually see me. But anyway, I feel like it is one of those situations where if you just go through the AFC real quickly, right? I think clearly there are about 8 guys that are definitely better than Kenny Pickett, right? Rodgers, and I'm just talking about for this year. I mean, you can make the argument, well, Rodgers has only got 1 or 2 more years. I'd rather have Kenny Pickett. That's not the argument. The argument is for this year, Rodgers is better, right? Definitively. Burrow is better without really much argument there. Sunshine from Jacksonville is better. You've got Herbert and you've got Mahomes. Those 5 are definitely better than Kenny Pickett. Now, then you go to guys like Lamar Jackson. It's hard for me to make a case that Kenny Pickett's better than Lamar Jackson, regardless of what you think about his style of play. So that's 6, right? Then you have Watson and Wilson. Like I said, if they go back to where they, you'd think they're going to be, it's 8 and 9 probably. And then you look at, is Tua better than Kenny Pickett? I would probably rather have Kenny Pickett, but I don't know that it's definitive that one is better than the other. So, I would probably put the number at about 8 in the AFC and maybe about 6 in the NFC of guys who are definitively clearly better than Kenny Pickett, which puts him at about 15. And then you have the argument, guys, the Tuas, Garoppolo, right? There's a number of guys that are out there that you compare them to Kenny Pickett and you say, well, if you put, for instance, Jimmy Garoppolo on the Steelers, are they better or are they worse or are they the same? It's a good argument. It's a good discussion. So that's where I would tell you, and that's what I would tell you is probably the most important thing to remember is that there are a number of guys who are definitively better than Kenny Pickett. So the number is very subjective once you get to, in my mind, to about 15 or 16. At that point, when you start throwing in rookies and other guys, it gets a little silly.
Yeah, I think the rookie thing is interesting because I've seen NFL executives, Paul, who said Kenny Pickett was better than any quarterback in this class, even though a lot of them got picked at the top of the draft and Kenny Pickett got, selected at the back. So what do you make of the national perception? Because I think that this is a kind of a microcosm of how people perceive the Steelers outside of Pittsburgh, outside of Steelers Nation. That there's a lot of rose-colored glasses in Pittsburgh sometimes. Where's the difference between, overall with the Steelers in the perception of them versus, what the reality might be?
I think that the perception of the Steelers locally is probably much different than it is nationally, for sure. And you can see that in a number of different ways. The way that, people write about players here and the way that people write about players nationally. Even in Vegas, I think the last time I looked, the over-under for the Steelers is like 8. So, it's not like anybody there is betting on the Steelers having this magical transformation and, this run the ball and be physical and all that other stuff is, we're going to dominate the line of scrimmage and be the Eagles and all that other stuff. There's only a few people that are buying into that, and most of them are here locally. I think nationally, people look at the Steelers and they still see a team that there really isn't all that dynamic on offense. Doesn't have really all that many dynamic playmakers. I know George Pickens is one, but for the most part, Najee Harris is a 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of guy. Deontay Johnson is what he is. I mean, for all of his quote unquote dynamic ability, he had 0 touchdowns last year. Allen Robinson's old, we keep hearing about the kid from Memphis. What's his name? Calvin Austin or whatever his name is. I mean, he's the new Senkez Golson of the Steelers. But at the end of the day, the only people talking about those guys are people that are here, for the most part. So that's the perception of the Steelers. The other perception is that basically the defense is very star-studded, but has some holes in it that have been exploited by other teams, and so I think most people see the Steelers as an 8-9, 9-8 kind of team, which is what they've been really the last 4 or 5 years or whatever it's been. They've been that team that hovers around 500 and sort of figures it out just to get just over 500. But I look at the division, Adam. They're not better than the Bengals. I think with a healthy Lamar Jackson, which is a really, 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 big caveat and if. But if Lamar Jackson's healthy, we've seen the Ravens are much better than they are when he's not healthy. And quite frankly, even though the Steelers can beat them, they're pretty good at against the rest of the league when they have Lamar Jackson. So, they're probably going to be a 10-11 win team if he stays healthy. And quite frankly, the wild card in it all is Deshaun Watson. Because if he returns to form, like we saw, when he was a star in Houston, I'm not sure the Steelers aren't the 4th best team in the league, in the division. And I think that a lot of people nationally, that's how they see the Steelers, to be honest. They basically think the Steelers, they have a lot of respect for them. That, Mike Tomlin is, and it's interesting, it's the opposite when it comes to Mike Tomlin. Nationally, the perception of Mike Tomlin is much different than it is locally. And the opposite way. So to answer your question, I think people nationally see the Steelers as an 8-9 win team. People locally see the Steelers as a 10-11 win team. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah, we will. And Paul, I wanted to ask about the perception of Kenny Pickett and how much of that local. I think part of it is he went to Pitt, and there's lots of people who want to see him do well. But let's say he throws the touchdown pass at the beginning of that Raiders game or at the beginning of that Baltimore game. The Steelers still win, but the offense doesn't look as good after he throws the touchdown at the beginning of the game instead of the end. How much do you think those game-winning drives at the end of the season are shaping people's excitement for what he can do in the coming year?
100%, because they're about the only thing you can point to. And listen, I'm a fan of Kenny Pickett. I hope he does well. Obviously, he's a Pitt guy, played with my son, the whole 9 yards. I mean, he's a great guy. He's obviously been a good ambassador and all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, if you take those 2 drives out of the equation, there's not a whole lot to really get excited about last year. Nobody wants to have that conversation. I'm not saying that doesn't mean he's going to be good. I'm not saying that he doesn't mean he did some good things, because he did. But the point is, 2 drives One against against two teams, by the way, who last year were notorious for giving up leads. If you look at what they did, I think the Ravens would have had like 16 wins or something like that if they had, held fourth quarter leads. They were very good at giving them up. And so, that doesn't discount what Kenny Pickett did. But my point is, I just don't get as excited about stuff like that, because to me, you win with consistency. You win with every single week you show up, you move the offense, you score points, and so, okay, they were able to have a couple of game-winning drives against the Raiders and the Ravens, and that was encouraging. But where was that the entire game? Where was that the other games? And for all we talk about, what did he start? Like 13 games last year, 12, 13 games, something like that last year?
Yeah.
What did he and what did he end up with? 7, 6 touchdown passes, something like that?
That's a low. Yeah, the stats aren't good.
It's got to be better. But again, locally, he's going to get the benefit of the doubt that a lot of other guys would not have gotten in that situation. If he was Kenny Pickett from, if he was Kenny Pickett from Iowa or Kenny Pickett from Iowa State, do you think he would have gotten the benefit of the doubt in the passes that he got last year when he played? Probably not. But again, it's okay. I happen to think he's a good player. I think he'll figure it out. And I don't know if he'll become a superstar, but I think he'll figure it out enough that the Steelers offense will be better. But I think nationally, there's a lot of people that are a lot more skeptical about it than locally, because they're not emotionally invested in it, because they're not emotionally invested in a local guy who could become one of the great stories, right, in sports in this town in a long, long time. So that's the difference.
Paul, I want to get your take. I talked about this with Joe Starkey on his mailbag video. People are asking questions about it, so I want to get your take on it as well. The promotion of David Morehouse has prompted a lot of speculation about what the Steelers might want to do in terms of renovating Acrisure Stadium, replacing Acrisure Stadium, maybe installing a dome so that you can host big events like the Super Bowl and the Final Four. What do you think of that whole conversation, Paul?
I think as long as there's a guy by the name of Rooney owning the Steelers and being in charge of what happens, all of this is really just kind of silly talk, because the Rooney family has made it clear they want an outdoor stadium, play on grass. That's sort of what they've wanted. Now, maybe they could change. Maybe Art Rooney II hands it off to whoever is next in line. I think Dan Rooney has a grandson or something that's in the organization that's been rising the ranks. Maybe the new generation reverses course. But to me, I listen to what the bosses say. And the Rooneys have made it very clear they want an outdoor stadium. They want it to be in the elements. They want grass on it. So, it's fun to speculate. I think one thing that definitely will happen here, they will either renovate the stadium or get a new stadium within the next, 5 to 10 years. There's no question about it. But what's going to happen with the training facility? Because I guarantee you this, and they've already talked about it, the fact that they've outgrown it. Either they're going to buy out Pitt, right? And Pitt's going to find a new place to train, or they're going to do what the Penguins did, find a place maybe out around the city somewhere, Cranberry or whatever, and build their own training facility. They have the space they need. They have all of the bells and whistles that they need and everything else, and let Pitt buy them out or pay them rent or whatever. But I can't see that arrangement lasting much longer, with them, sharing a training facility that's probably too small for both of them. And now, that's probably far more on the table and closer to coming to fruition than anything that's going to go on with the new stadium. The new stadium is complicated because the stadium authorities involved, the city's involved, the county's involved, the state's involved. There's a lot of different, moving parts to make it happen. But unless either there's a complete change of heart from Art Rooney II or whoever he hands the team to, his son or grandson or Dan Rooney's grandson or whoever it is that I think it's Dan Rooney's grandson that's risen in the ranks there. If he takes over, maybe, he's a new generation, a younger generation, and he thinks things through a little differently. But I think as long as Art Rooney II is involved, there will not be a dome or artificial turf or any of that stuff. Now, you'll see the stadium get renovated, and maybe even they'll try and build a new stadium with more bells and whistles. But I would be shocked unless it's a retractable roof. Which, brings a whole nother set of financial issues and problems into the equation as well. I would be shocked if they build a dome here for the Steelers as long as the Rooneys are in charge.
Yeah, I wonder, Paul, because we hear so much about, especially the city really wants to be a sports tourism destination. And I think something that, really was highlighted to me this past week is, you watch car races. Kansas City has a NASCAR track. We're one of the biggest markets that doesn't have a NASCAR track. We don't have a ton of these events that are involved with the Steelers, Penguins, or Pirates that Pittsburgh hosts. And if you don't have those, can you be a sports tourism destination? You mentioned the stakeholders. Do they say, hey, if we're going to spend money on this, we want to get value out of it from a civic standpoint and tourism dollars. We don't just want it to be what, Art Rooney wants it to be. I mean, can you see that being part of the conversation is, yeah, maybe the Rooneys don't want that, but what if the city wants to have, the city, the county, the state wants to have a destination for events like that?
Well, I mean, obviously the Rooneys have always been really good partners with the city, and I guess they could be convinced of that. But by the same token, the Rooneys have been very good at pushing back when there have been things that have been run past them about, parking situations, the casino. There's been a number of issues where the Rooneys haven't exactly been good neighbors and have pushed back and said, no, that's not best for us, which is really their concern. That's why, even though I think that you're right, the city could go in that direction, I'd be shocked if the Rooneys, unless they really want it, are going to agree to play in a dome.
Paul, I want to switch topics to the Pirates. It's been a tough couple of weeks, we're getting into it being a tough couple of weeks. The offense has just kind of gone away. There's guys on the team that we don't even know anymore. Like I didn't need this Palacios guy. I'd never heard of him before he was on the team, and then he was in the starting lineup last night.
Bucko baseball is back, baby.
Right. This is the way it normally is. I guess my question for you, Paul, is why is this still happening 4 years into this rebuild? Why is it as soon as the first injuries of the season take place, we're already dipping into random guys from the waiver wire and not legit prospects, guys that you're excited about?
I got to give credit where credit's due to Dejan. He last year started coining the phrase "waiver dude." It would be like, I don't know, the latest waiver dude is at bat. I don't even know who it is. And just like you said, and again, that's sort of the way they operate. Listen, if the Pirates want to ensure that all of the goodwill they build up in April is gone by June, they will continue down this path. Where it appears, and again, Adam, I don't know all of the ins and outs of the days and the service time and this and that and the other thing, but it appears like they're doing everything in their power to save every ounce of every single ounce of service time and Super 2 status and all the other crap with their young guys, right, in order to try and not bring them up. And to me, listen, people just got interested in your team again, okay? And if you're going to do this thing where we're going to wait till July, June 18th, and then magically, Henry Davis or, Quinn Priester or somebody else or whatever, now magically they're ready to go. They just needed that one extra month, but now they're ready to go. If you're going to try and pull that off, it's going to go down in flames in spectacular fashion. Because at the end of the day, Pirate fans, they want to believe in their team. They want to believe that things are getting better. You saw the optimism. You saw how excited people started getting about the team, how giddy they started getting. You saw people projecting 90-plus wins and all the other stuff. The quickest way to lose it is to operate this way, which is the way that you've operated for, as long as I can remember. And here's the thing, Adam. If they want to double down on this, go about a month from now or whatever, a month and a half from now, and they start trading the Rich Hills and the Carlos Santanas of the world for prospects. That probably would be the final nail in the coffin if they're 3 games out or something, right? And they start offloading some of the guys that are actually competent enough to help them win. So I agree with you. Listen, I am one that am more open-minded about the Pirates than most. But this is a horrible look. I mean, you've got 2 catchers who are clearly not good enough. You got a kid down there that is, he's now, and someone pointed this out today. He's 23 years old. It ain't like he's 19. He's 23 years old. What are we waiting for here? Oh, that's right. I heard on the Fan the other night on the post-game show, Dan Zangroli played a clip from Mitch Keller where he talked about how Austin Hedges is good in the clubhouse. He's good in the clubhouse. He's good in preparing the pitchers by having good scouting reports. He's a good leader. He's been around a lot. He's good for young pitchers. That's why we have to run him out there every night. I mean, if you want to continue to lose the people that you finally got interested in your team, you'll continue down that path.
Well, here's what I think really needs to shape that conversation too, Paul, is in years past when the Pirates were contending back in 2013, 14, 15, there was always a team that was definitely a little bit better, right? The Cardinals were always a little bit better then. The Cubs were coming up on their run to win the World Series, in 2016 after the Pirates played them in that 2015 wild card game. I don't sit here with that perception today that there's any team in this division that is like conclusively better than the Pirates. I think maybe the Brewers. I think over the long run, the Brewers are probably the better team. But the Reds, no way. I mean, they've manhandled the Reds this season. St. Louis can't catch a break, and they've lost a ton of ground. Like, at a certain point, Paul, shouldn't we be talking about this in terms of this division seems to be there to be won by making decisions like we're talking about, by saying we're going to burn a year of service time because we feel like this is a golden opportunity that if we wait a year and St. Louis is back to being its normal self or whatever, maybe that year of service time doesn't matter as much because we're not going to have as good a chance as we have now to win this division.
How many times have we learned that, Adam? How many times have they, protected the service time crap with these guys like it's platinum or a diamond mine, right? They protected it and protected it and protected it, and guess what? 7 years or 8 years later, who cares? It doesn't make a difference. I'm not saying baseball should be. I'm not saying the Pirates should be, reckless, short-sighted, and everything else. But 2 things. One, to your point, this is a division that is very winnable, very winnable. And so they should actually alter some of the things that they maybe had a plan. Well, we're going to stick to our plan. Well, you know what? Did your plan include the rest of the division completely collapsing this year? Probably not. So you got to change because you have a chance to win it. That's number one. And number 2, we know there are better options in the minors than some of the guys they have on their roster right now. That's what's so frustrating. Henry Davis, Quinn Priester, right? I don't care.
Andy Rodriguez,
I don't care if, going another month from now will give you 1 extra year of control or whatever that crap, whatever that is. I don't care about that because at the end of the day, right, you're trying to win now. And number 2, all of that stuff doesn't come into play for 6 more seasons. For God's sakes, the asteroid could hit the earth by then. So you might as well.
I was going to say, Paul, I've written too that they never let these guys get to the last year of arbitration. They either trade them or they sign them. I mean, and that has only been reinforced by the Reynolds contract, right?
Right.
That was probably the most improbable contract we never thought was going to get signed if you went into the season. That's signed. Hayes is signed. McCutchen, Marte, all of those guys either got signed or they got traded. They never got to the last year of arbitration here. So treating it as this thing that's going to make a Pirates World Series run in the future is insane to me because that's just never been the way they've actually done business.
Right. That's the point. That's why it's always been, to me, a shell game, and it's always been very intellectually dishonest when they've given us all these reasons why they can't bring these guys up and this and that, and why they're trying to maximize their service time and all this other stuff. As I said, Adam, if it's not even relevant for at least 5 or 6 years from now. So to me, what are we doing here? I mean, if 5 years from now, Henry Davis is the greatest catcher that's ever played, guess what? You're not going to sign him anyway. And if he's the greatest a catcher ever signed, ever played, and you had that extra year of control, okay, maybe you get one more prospect for him when you trade him. But at the end of the day, what are we talking about? It makes no sense at this point, given the goodwill that they've built up and the fact that this division is 100%, there to be taken. It makes no sense.
Paul, wanted to get your thoughts on the Bob Huggins situation. Obviously he used the slur in a radio interview the other day, the West Virginia basketball coach. What should happen from here, Paul?
Well, what did happen? That's the big thing. Did you see what happened to him? They announced basically, he's going to be suspended for 3 games. He's suspended immediately. He's suspended for 3 games. This was from Mike Casaza. They're suspended for 3 games. A reduction of $1 million per year in his contract, and he's got to do sensitivity training. That seems very reasonable to me. I know people are angry. They wanted their pound of flesh, and they wanted him fired. I look at it this way, Adam. This guy has done so much for that state. Forget about basketball. Okay, that's a very poor state. I mean, let's throw. I'm not trying to be stereotypical. All you got to do is look at all of the different ways that you can rank that state. They're a very poor state. They don't have. There's a lot of places where there's a lot of people around that state that are hurting. And you know what? Bob Huggins has done a bunch of things to whether it's support of coal miners and the coal mining families, and the coal mining families that lost their lost their loved one, or lost their dad, or their husband, or whatever in the coal mine. Look at a bunch of the things that he's done to raise money and go to those small towns and be supportive. What he's done to bring a hospital to northern West Virginia, for God's sakes. All of the money he raises for breast cancer, right? He's a champion of West Virginia, and he's a guy who's been out in the forefront of trying to make life better for people in that state beyond just what he does as a basketball coach. Did he screw up? Yep, he did. He absolutely screwed up. What he did was unconscionable. It was actually, to be honest, I would much rather they say we're going to fire him for just being so stupid that that he would say this on the air. But to me, 40 years of being who he has been for that state, I got to be honest with you, I have a hard time canceling him or ending his career or whatever over him trying to be funny on the radio, making a joke that obviously is an off-color joke, whatever. To me, he apologized. If you listen to his apology, he never says, well, if I offended somebody, and all those other, loaded words that people use when they're trying not to apologize but have to issue an apology. He made it very clear. I screwed up, right? He said, I screwed up. There's no excuse. I'm not going to make an excuse. And now I'm willing to accept the consequence. Okay, that to me is a sincere apology. He's giving up $1 million a year, and let's not forget. I mean, his contract can run to 2027, 24, 25. I mean, that's $4 million he's getting fined for this essentially if he wants to stay that long. And he's obviously got to go to sensitivity training. I'm sure there's going to be other little things like, go on campus and speak to, the LGB groups or whatever. So I think that's the way you handle this thing. He shouldn't have gotten fired. I'm glad he didn't.
And with that, Paul, any final thoughts for the week?
No, I think this was a good show. We got it in. You got my blood pressure up talking about the Pirates. That's always a good show. I even had my headphones on, so everyone probably could hear it this week. Yeah,
great audio, and nice to have you back in studio. And thanks for stopping by, Paul. Thanks to everyone if you enjoyed the video, just a reminder, pop a like, help us out with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. We're doing more and more every week. Like I said, we've added Joe Starkey to the rotation. He's doing stuff with us on Wednesday mornings. So make sure you're subscribed and check out that subscription deal down in the description, $6 for 6 months of access to post-gazette.com. Paul, thanks for stopping by. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right, my man. We'll do it soon.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.